Okay everyone, so in this video, I just want to run you through on how to understand what are the different CSS positioning properties that you can utilize for being able to position your elements and lay out your design in CSS, in pure CSS. So I have here a project, and let me just go create an index.html file here. So I'm just going to use Emmet here for this quick template. So I'm using the exclamation mark for me to be able to generate a quick CSS positioning template for HTML5. And I'm going to have this is positioning playground. Okay, so we'll create a playground for CSS positioning. So one of the first things that a beginner should be understanding when it comes to the CSS positioning property of CSS, or the cascading style sheet language, will be the flow layout, or also known as normal flow, or also known as, sometimes it's called render flow. So if I go to MDN here, I would suggest that you try to read more about the CSS flow layout. This is a good way for you to at least get some basic idea on what I meant when we talk about normal flow or flow layout. I'm going to leave a link to this on the description of this video lesson. Okay, I have here also my GitHub repository, remote repository, because every changes I would want to go and try to push it to my repository here. So I'm just going to create a repository. So if you are not yet familiar with what Git is and what GitHub is, it's a way for you to collaborate. It provides you a lot of features that will be allowing you to also have version control for the project that you're working on. So right now, I'm just going to create a new repository that I will be calling CSS Positioning Playground, and so that you will also have a reference to whatever I'll be doing, you can check out the different version that will be pushed to this remote repository based from what we have discussed in the blog article that I've written. Okay, so what I'm going to do, one way to create a repository will be for you to run each of these lines. But in this case, I'm going to go and copy all of those line of code. So this is just going to be echoing the markdown heading. And it's going to create a readme.md markdown. And it's going to initialize that readme or this project as a Git repository. And we have here add readme. We'll be adding it to this repository. We'll be committing it. And we have this first commit message, and it will be to the main branch. And this is the link to this specific playground. And we'll be pushing it to the origin main here. Okay. So I just wanted to read through that. Just make sure that you don't run any scripts that you don't understand when you're, of course, that's one rule. And now let's go back here. Let's go and try to paste that into our terminal. And you would see that will be generating this lines of code. And at the last part here, we would want to push this to our origin main. And I'll go back to our repository here. Now this should be allowing us to have the different commits that are on our remote repository on GitHub. Now let's try to go and add a div with the class container. I'm using Emmet here. That's why you are seeing here this IntelliSense. It's automatically detecting that we want to create here a class name that we will call container. So you can call this anything that you want. Okay, because this is going to be a customized class name that you can try to utilize. But in my case, I'm going to call it div container. And let's just press tab key or click on this div container here. And just for us to monitor whatever changes we're doing, I'm going to git add all, git commit -m add div container git push. So that should be committing the changes that we've made on our GitHub repository. So now each changes will be easily for you to be able to check out whatever changes that you've made, and you'll have a version control. Now let's try to go and create a div.box 1, and let's multiply that by 5 because we want to have at least 5 boxes. And I'm just going to maximize the feature here of Visual Studio Code, and I'm going to put here, let's move down here, I'm going to type box 1, then I'm going to replace each one of this with numbers so that this will be some of the boxes that we will be playing around with once we try to work on the examples that we will be working on. Now guys, I'm just going to go and create a set, or I'm going to choose here some palette that I'll be using for the exercise. And right now, I do have already this color palette from Color Hunt, and I would want to use this, some of the colors here for the project that we will be working on. And I've already chosen some predefined palettes here, so I'm just going to put that on our style tag just for simplistic reasons. And I'm going to comment this out here so that we can serve that as a reference. And I'm going to auto comment this using the control key plus the / so that you would see that will be generating a comment for us. But I think I made a mistake there, so let's just go and add this here. And let's see, why is that not working for us? I think that's because we should be inside of the comment for the style tag. So I'm just going to maximize the use of this primary, secondary, accent 1, accent 2, accent 3 here, just for the purpose of styling some of our HTML elements here. Now let's try to add some Google font, and I'm going to be maximizing the use of Bebas here, and I would want to choose the cursive value, so I'll have the 400 here. I'm just going to import this, just going to get this at import, and just going to add that here. And then let's go back to our body element, or our style tag here. Let's go and add here a comment of, or a font family of Bebas, or we can actually just copy paste that just so that we will be able to maximize the use of this font family. So I'll be leaving a link to this on our description for this lesson. So let me just open my live server here, right click, open live server. And let's see. Okay, so now the live server is working. We have our local host here and it's working. We have the boxes here, and we would want to apply some more stylings here. So let's go add some more styling to this project, or to the body element, just so that we can have our playground here be able to look a little bit much more presentable, but not too presentable. We're just going to be using this for at least referencing our, or at least be able to distinguish whatever we will be doing in our project here, or be able to identify what's happening in our project, right? So I'm just going to add letter spacing, 3 pixels here, and let's go and see on our live server what that will look like. Okay, so we now have box 1, box 2, box 3, box 4, box 5 on the center, and we have some stylings being implemented in our project. So let's just add some commit here, git add all, git commit -m, add color palette, and Google font body styling, Google font and body styles. Git push. Okay. Okay, now let's try to apply some CSS properties to our container boxes. So I've already, just to at least show you whatever we will be doing, Just going to type that here. We'll have a height of 50 VH. I think that's incorrect. And I'm not spelling it correctly. We have our width at 50%. We have our background color. And we'll be maximizing the use of this secondary color. And let's have a margin to center both top and bottom. Usually this is one of the common techniques for you to be able to center elements. I think it's better if we try to go and push this here and put this here on the side just to at least see what's happening on our live server here. And let's have the color. Again, we'll be maximizing the use of our accent tree here. Oops. And place that inside of the color. And then let's have a text align center. Save that. I think that should be. And let's have a padding of 2%. Border of 10 pixels and solid black. And of course, now we have those boxes. And I think I made a mistake here. We need to place all of this inside of our div. Okay, so let's format this using our format document with prettier. So this should be how it looks now. So I think we need to adjust some of the colors here, but we'll just need to add some stylings for our different boxes in this case. So that we'll have box 1, we'll have a background color of red. Let's have box 2. Just take note what's happening right now. You would see we have each of the following getting stacked on top of one another. So we have box 1, box 2, box 3. This is the default position property value for some of the elements, and that will be the static position property. And if we try to add another box 3 here, you will see that they are all stacked on top of one another. Okay, and let's have a green color here, or let's box 4. Let's have a background color cyan, and box 5. Let's have a background color magenta. Okay, so first thing that you will notice here is that all of them are stacked on top of one another. So one of the key things to take note of, if we try to inspect element, going to put this at the bottom part, and if we try to look at the layout in our inspector and look at the layout tab on top here, I'm using Firefox, by the way, just to at least be able to see what's the current default value. We haven't added a position property value yet, and you would see here we have the static position property value, which is the default for all of our HTML elements. And again, the normal flow here, or the render flow, as you can see, we can try to see that all box 1, box 2, box 3, or all of the boxes inside of our div container, they are on top of one another. Now, let's try to go and add here CSS Positioning Playground exercise so that we can go and try to have some sort of at least a project output that you'll be able to add to your portfolio as a quick overview here, or at least have a simple layout design for this exercise. And one of the things that you would see here, take note everybody, let me just go and add here position static. This is the default value. Let's have position relative. And I'm going to comment this out first because we would want to just go and have all of this. And I'm just going to copy paste perhaps this and then change the value here. So that's a fixed value. We also have our fix absolute. And we also have our box 5, and this will be sticky. So these are some of the, let's have sticky. Box 2 will have the relative, just to distinguish what properties we will be using for each of the boxes that we have here for the demonstration that we will be having. Okay, we have fixed, and we also have what we call the absolute value, and we also have here the sticky. So now let's try to talk about the sticky position property value here. So if we are using the position static property value, one thing to take note of is that we cannot add some properties like the top left 50% here. If I save this, nothing's happening, right? So that's just something that you need to at least be aware of, especially if you will be utilizing the position property static default value of an element. It will not be allowing us to add this properties top and left. So now if we try to go and add a position relative here, you would see that nothing would really be happening to our box 2 relative here. But the only difference is if we add the following properties here, and again this can be top. Let's say I would want to have 10 pixels for the top. Let's also have a 10 pixels for the left. You would see our box 2 relative position property that has the position relative property is now moving 10 pixels to the top and is moving 10 pixels to the left side. And you can also add bottom 10 pixels. We can see that we can also have, or let's say, let's try to have this at 50 pixels. That should be, I think we'll need to comment this out. You would see it went up. So we can also add right 50 pixels. That should be moving our element to the right. But let's try to remove this property. You would see it, or sorry, it move our element here with the right 50 pixels starting from the right side. Okay, so it now can take on all of these properties from the top, left, bottom, right, unlike when we have the static position. And both position static and relative are just the same. However, the only difference will be that with the static position, it doesn't allow us to use properties like the top, bottom, left, and right properties. So I hope that that's clear, that the relative positioning will allow you to change the positioning of the element to where it normally would be in the normal document flow, and if it has the default value of static position. So we can see here that the element with the relative position, when we apply the top and left pixels here, right and bottom properties, it move it up, down, left, or right based on the specified length or values of those properties. And in this case, we have the blue. Let's try to replace this with green, just to at least, and I've actually committed this already. I'm going to transition this to blue here. So we have the box 2 relative position has a 50 pixels from the right and 50 pixels from the bottom from its original location. One thing to take note of, box 3 here and box 4 are not getting removed from the document flow. So it no longer follows document flow of a statically positioned element, the box 2 here, but it's not removing the box 3 and box 4 that we have with the text content fixed and absolute, right? So one thing to take note of, normally we don't really use the top, right, bottom here on a relatively positioned element, because that will just be moving our element out of the document flow, and sometimes it can become difficult to style elements around it. So what we would want to do here is to maximize the use of this to reference. Most of the time, you'll be using the position absolute as a reference to this position relative. So later on, we'll talk more about that as we move forward with our lesson here. So now, let's try to go and let's talk about the fixed position property. So we do have here our position property fix. Let me just uncomment that. And one thing that you will notice, it actually remove the element from the normal document flow, and it also move the box 4 with the absolute text content, move itself on top of the original location from where box 3 was located, or the one that has the position fixed value here. Again, this is the original location from where box 3 is located, but because we maximize the use of the fixed position property, it removed it from the normal document flow, and now the position absolute box 4 is behind it. So it's actually rendering our element here. Let me just comment out our position relative so that it will go back to the original location. So it's being treated as if it doesn't exist there, and it's now on top of the layer. So if you think about this as a layer, we have the box 3 as the foreground and the absolute value box 4 as the background, from where it's now at the back of the box 3 element that we have here. So one thing to take note of, this position fixed will not be relative to any of the other elements that we have here, but will be relative to the whole of the HTML document, the entire HTML element. And it will not be related to any of the other elements, the parent elements. And it will be staying in the same position once we try to go and scroll our screen or our playground exercise viewport here. Now, if I try to give our box 3 here with, let's say, top 0, so similar with, you would see now box 3 is now related to the whole HTML document. It went up on the top of the browser, as you can see here. Okay, so you would see there that, just to, let's have this blue here, and let's have our green back here, just to show you that this is now on top of the 0 position, top 0 position on the horizontal axis that we have our box 3 here when we declare the top 0 value. So it's not getting rendered on our box 3 element here, is not getting position relative to its parent container, which is our container div, right? So you would see it totally got removed from the normal document flow. And we can see this in action once we try to add some more content. So let me just copy paste some of the contents that we have here, and let's paste that here. And now let's see what will happen if we try to paste our content here, the static position, the default position for all, relative position will be allowing the element to be positioned relatively. And you'll see the box 3 is now fixed on top of the browser window, on the top of the browser window. Once we already have some element contents, or let's say paragraphs that we've added, and we now have scrolling activated as we try to scroll down the content of our document. Now let's try to add a position absolute to our box 4. Okay, so if we go up here and we reactivate this and uncomment our box 4 absolute here, so we can see that it's still inside. Let me just, I think I made a mistake here. It also removed the document, or the box 4, from the normal document flow, and similar with the fixed position property here, it allowed the sticky, or the box 5, it went outside, or it went back at the back on of the box 4 with the absolute value position property, similar with what happened during the thing that we did here on our position fix. And one thing to take note of here is that when we talk about the position absolute, this can be relative to its parent container. So if we try to give it a top 0 value here, you would see it also positioned itself on the same position from where our fixed value here. And it's relative to the whole document. However, the difference with the fixed, let's say I go to the parent container here, I'm going to use the position relative. So as I mentioned earlier, usually a good combination of the position relative property and the position absolute would be you having the child element positioned absolute, and we have our parent element container as position relative. So that once we want to, let's say for example, I want to center this box for absolute here, what I can do is to actually maximize the use of this syntax. This is a very common technique from where we have the left top 50%, then we and transform, and we'll be using the translate property, and I'm going to have negative 50% here. So I'm just trying to center. Let me just show you what will happen. So we can see that most of the HTML elements will be starting at 0 on the top left, right? And if we want to center this box 4, we would want it to go to the center. We would usually maximize the use of this technique from where we are using the transform property. Then we're translating it, and we're giving it an x and y axis of negative 50% and negative 50%. Now we have our box for absolute value boxed here, positioned to the center of the relatively positioned container, and we were able to position our box 4 to the center of the container parent element div that we have. So now that we understand that position absolute is really useful when we want to position an element on a specific position using the top, left, bottom, and right properties, and if we don't want any other element to move around it. So this is really useful in combination with the relative position that is usually set to the parent element container that it can be able to reference. Just take note, if you did not declare any position property value to the parent container, position absolute that we have here will be referencing the whole document. So again, take note that if you want to be able to reference an element relatively or absolutely positioned, you will need to use or reference one of the other positioning properties, such as relative, absolute, fixed, or sticky, so that you can go and make the elements positioned absolutely inside of it. Now, for the last position property, the sticky position is considered to be as a combination of both relative and position fixed or fixed position. So if we try to go and test things out, let me just comment out the position absolute here. Let's try to go comment this out. And we have the box 5 sticky. Let's also try to comment out fixed here, just for us to see what will happen. Now if box 5 is sticky, and we try to have position sticky, let's save that and just close this. Let's try to go and give it a value of top 50 pixels. Let's see what will happen. So nothing seems to be working. However, once we try to scroll our browser, and you would see here, it's moving downward, right? So if we try to resize this again, and you would see it's moving downward based from that declaration of top 50 here. Let's see if we try to reduce this to 30. What will happen? How about 20? So it will be based from the top of the browser, not the parent container. If you try to look at how this is working. And if we try to give it a 0 value, let's see what will happen. Now it's on the top of the browser. So it's relative to the top of the browser. And we can add some spaces depending on the top, bottom, left, and right property positions again, as we have used in our fix and other position properties. So that's it for this lesson. I hope you learned some tricks that you can try to utilize for your layouts in your projects. So as a quick recap, we have the static position that will be the default position, and we have our relative position that allows us to set the top, right, bottom, left properties, and it's almost same with the position static, but the only difference is that the top left properties are not recognized once we use the default value of static. And when we have we also have the fixed position here that will be allowing us to work with positioning our element to the top of the HTML document. And just like absolute position, it's almost similar with absolute position, except that with the absolute position, this can be relative to the parent container and not just the whole HTML document. And also the sticky position here that will be allowing us to work similar with fixed and relative, and you can set an offset from where the scrolling of the element once we try to reach the top of the browser. So that's it. I hope you learned something in this lesson, and thank you, and see you on our next lessons.